Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the next edition of New England Connects. I'm Donna Shea. I'll be your moderator today. I'm the Executive Director of the T2 Center at UConn and the co-chair with Bob Goober of the Education Committee for the chapter. Well, it's the end of summer, so what better to talk about than preparing for winter operations? We're very excited to have our speakers today. But first, I want to take a moment to thank our chapter sponsors. We really couldn't do this work without them. So we thank them for their current and continued support of all of our activities. And also I want to thank Regina Hackett, of course, from the T2 Center. We certainly couldn't do this without our Zoom producer extraordinaire, as a matter of fact. Make sure to mark your calendars for September 23rd. That'll be the next Chapter Connects. It'll be an exciting opportunity to talk to young professionals in public works and hear about their issues and challenges and opportunities. So Regina will be posting the link in the chat box for you. So today we're going to talk about Scalable Road Weather Information Systems, or RWIS. We have three fantastic speakers today. Our first speaker will be Rich Niles, who's a project manager with Woodard & Curran. I'm not completely sure, but I have a feeling that we'll be completely entertained by our second speaker, who's Robert Brutus Cantareggi, who's the Director of Public Works for the town of Franklin, Massachusetts. And our last speaker is Dan Mason. And Dan is the Public Works Director for the town of Sudbury, Mass. So we're thrilled to have all of our presenters. And I'm going to turn it over to Rich, who's going to kick us off today. Thanks, Rich.
All right, thanks, Donna. Okay, assuming everybody can see my screen. Okay.
You're good.
Right. Okay, so yeah, it does seem a little odd to be talking about winter operations and snow when it's in the 90s today. So it's a little strange, but like you said, this is when we start to prepare for that. So you know, what we want to talk about today is two pilot projects that Franklin and Sudbury did during the same season with similar technology applications, and we want to talk about you know, the opportunities to optimize winter road maintenance, talk a little bit about each of the town's operations, and then what RWIS is all about, the pilot approach, and some of the results of these pilots for the two towns. And when we talk about winter operations, these are the things that I think of when it comes to optimization, and I think a lot of these resonate with folks that are on this call, the guys that are on the road. There's obviously a lot of expectations from the public for you know, having roads cleaned and cleared and safe at all times. Responsiveness, you know, we talk about level of service and operational efficiency. You know, how can we improve those things? And what tools are we using to do that? There's also environmental concerns that Franklin will speak to about chloride levels in drinking water that have been increasing over time. Potential surface water impacts, or the potential cost savings from implementing RWIS. It all comes down to the cost benefit of implementing this type of program. And then, you know, as most of you are familiar, there are requirements, stormwater permit requirements to optimize winter operations. So I think we need to start to look at different tools that we can implement to try to achieve some of those goals. So I'm going to turn it over to Brutus and have him speak a little bit about some of the issues in Franklin and his operations for winter and what he's done to optimize so far.
Thanks, Rich. Well, Rich kind of touched on our environmental concerns. This is a slide that I present to our city council every year. You know, we as public works directors wear a lot of hats, and obviously, you know, when we're talking snow, that's all about clearing the roads and, you know, making safe travel. But, you know, I'm also a drinking water guy and a sewer guy and trash guy and everything else. But this is one thing I had started to notice in town, is because the expectations of the folks, you know, over the last 20 plus years is they want to be able to drive around all the time. They want the roads all cleared, and with manpower issues and everything else, it's all about salt. I mean, that's just one of the ways to do it. But as you can see, I went back, and through the years, this is one of our main wells that's also near 495 in the interstate, which is maintained by Mass DOT. But you can see that the sodium levels, you know, Mass DP, I mean, it's a secondary contaminant. They recommend less than 20 parts per million. But you can see through the years, you know, we went basically from 17 parts per million up to, you know, 2008, 18, you know, 70 parts per million. this is, we test this in the springtime, and then obviously it's flushed out of the system, but it's not healthy. And I make the joke to my city councilors, what do you want to do? And I tell them that's why there's so much hypertension in Franklin, and people are just, high blood pressure and anxious because we get salt in the water. And, and then I asked them, do you want me to stop salting, people? And they're like, no, keep going. Because I just want to say the other expectation in town is that after the last snowflake falls, pretty much what we do is we want to see black on the road, every road within 4 hours. So, I mean, on a main road, the road will be black down to pavement. On a secondary road or subdivision, maybe it's just a center lane or the center mile, but that's basically what our expectations are. Next slide, Rich. So just give you a little overall of this town operation of Franklin, about 35,000 people, 27 square miles, 200 miles of roadway. We're the largest town or city in Norfolk County. Our snow budget's, 5-year running average, 1.1 million. I use around 6,000 tons of salt. It was a lot more. During snow operations, about $9,000 an hour when we're out there. Our current techniques, like a lot of folks, road temperature sensors on all our trucks, ground speed control, spreaders, the calibration that we all do. We pre-treat with brine, and then we have GPS monitoring of all our trucks. Next slide, Rich. So this, when I first got here, they were using a sand and salt mixture. And I mean, I'm not really going to go into the whole why we got away from sand, because it's just expensive to get rid of and it's not that effective. So we went to it was a more salt type thing. But the previous folks here, they used to treat the whole town. Every time, there was a little ice out there, they treat the whole town. And they used basically 14, I have 14 sanders that go out, or salters. 21 employees, and we'd use 400 yards of salt. I looked at that and it just didn't make sense to me. I mean, obviously we need to do our main roads, but in our hills, in our schools and stuff like that. But, I didn't need to do every subdivision in town. Franklin is basically a suburban community. So the joke I always make is I have 264 cul-de-sacs. So if you can imagine how many subdivisions are out there. So that's what I got to handle. So I actually went to the council. I said, hey, you know what, we're going to start. We're not going to be treated the whole town every time, and people need to slow down. People need to, if it is a little icy out there, if you're not going to go off the road and kill yourself doing 20 miles an hour on the subdivision. So I got them to buy off on that. So basically what we did, we call it the 5-truck route, but basically it's, 6 salters, because one goes to the schools and the town buildings, 7 employees, and we used 120 yards of salt instead of 400 yards of salt. Besides the cost savings, obviously the environmental, we use a lot less salt this way, and we've reduced it. So this is like one of the big like I always call low-hanging fruit we went after. We saved money and we still met the needs of the town with a lot of public education. That's it.
All right. Well, thanks, Brutus. It's a good overview of the operations, and I think this is certainly the fastest way to reduce chlorides in the environment is just how you manage the operations, and so how do we take it further, I guess is really what we're trying to get at in this presentation. So Dan, I'll turn it over to you, and you can talk a little bit about your operations, and then we'll get into discussion of the pilot.
Sure. Thank you, Rich, and good job, Bruce. So we're not dissimilar than many other communities, even like Franklin. We have a population of 18,000 from 2018. Just under 25 square miles with 138 miles of roadways. Our snow budget on a 5-year average is about 840,000. We're a little bit higher than that now. We went through 2,250 tons of salt. This past year, we were actually at a little over 2,700. We have a little lower average than Brutus has. We're about $3,000 for full snow operations. I think that's because we have a smaller team. Some of my current techniques, though, are basically blossomed from my initiatives. I don't have the chloride issues that Brutus has in his waters. I actually don't handle the water in our particular town. It's by a separate district. I am a water guy and a sewer guy, but I just don't handle those things in Sudbury. So all these techniques that I'm going to mention now are all through my initiatives, basically to improve our level of service here in Sudbury. So we, like many other towns, have road temperature sensors on all our vehicles, installed ground speed controllers on our spreaders. Those all have proximity sensors, sense plow up, plow down, and whatnot. We implemented pre-treatment with brine. We have two main routes now. We do mains and secondaries with the brine. Sometimes we'll do the hills, throughs, and secondary roads, some cul-de-sacs. It depends on the storm event and the amount of time we have. We're actually implemented this year a route optimization program for all of our spreader and our plow routes, and we have AVL on all of our vehicles. And I mentioned the equipment sensors for the spreaders and the plows. So again, my initiatives here are a little bit different. I just wanted to increase the level of service for the community. When I first started here a little over 5 years ago, we were still spreading the sand salt mix, and I made all these changes within 5 years, and we've seen an immense level of service change, even commented by the police and fire departments. We didn't have teams respond until we had 2 inches of snow on the roadways. Now we actually pre-plan our events. Everyone knows before they leave at the end of the day when they're coming in, how many contractors are coming in. And it actually helps out a lot with the team morale as well, because now the guys know, hey, I got to go home and get 6 or 7 hours of sleep. I know I'm coming in at midnight or 9 o'clock tonight or whatnot. So we've done a lot of improvements. Next slide, Rich.
Yeah, next slide is kind of getting into technology a little bit, Dan. But yeah, no, I wanted to commend you on your improvements to operations and level of service. You guys really have tightened things up and are trying to implement a variety of techniques. And I think when I first came to Woodard & Curran from my previous firm, you were already actually working on somewhat of a pilot for RWIS, and so we kind of teamed up, and then we pulled in Brutus and said, let's do this thing and try to figure it out. So yeah, you were already well on your way to implementing some type of RWIS pilot. So for those of you that don't really know, roadway information systems, it's not a new technology. It's not a new program. It's been around since the 90s. The first generation stations that you see on the right there, they're towers. They're a lot of elaborate equipment. It's expensive. Each station is somewhere in the range, or used to be in the range of 80 to 120,000. And I think Brutus, almost 12 years ago, we talked about RWIS, and we talked about the cost, and right off the bat, I said, well, one weather station is going to cost you about 120 grand. And it was a big fat no right from the beginning. And so it's hard for a small community to see the benefit and understand, how it's going to help improve their operations, save money, et cetera, all those benefits when the initial investment is relatively high. So that's always been the challenge for me with working with DPWs, is trying to find a way to scale this down. And so hence the pilot that we embarked upon. But what has changed as well is there's incredible advancements in technology, kind of plug and play equipment. Standalone, doesn't require the same level of equipment that you see on the right here. And that's really brought the cost down dramatically, and we'll get into that in a little bit. But the general principle has been to have weather stations and in-pavement sensors. All this has gone to now non-invasive sensors, so there's no more sensors in the pavement because the technology has advanced. But either way, you have a weather station and data that's collected. It's sent to a cell tower. It's managed in the cloud. And then it's ingested by forecast models for atmospheric and road pavement forecast, actually. And I'll talk about that a little bit more. And then that data is pushed back out to weather portals, smartphones, tablets, whatever devices you want to use for your crews, so that they can be informed about the forecasts and changing conditions. They can get alerts, different things like that. So just to give you a quick sense of the number of stations in a few states in New England, this is a snapshot. These are road weather information stations that have been around for some time. As part of this pilot, we did coordinate a bit with Mass DOT and try to talk about data sharing. They were working on getting sort of their next generation RWIS stations out there. There's definitely some opportunity, and we'll talk about that in the future, or later on rather. But just to give you a sense, so you've got statewide, you've got 40 stations in Massachusetts, and you can see the rest of the numbers here. So keep that in mind when we talk about how many stations we had with each of the communities here. And so the basic approach was, you know, and I said this before, the challenge is scaling this down to a community level. And so what we found is a product that was worth piloting. The Frost Control Systems was the vendor that approached the towns and presented a pretty attractive introductory rate. And we also brought in a meteorological support team, former colleagues of mine in Wood, who do a lot of this work up in Canada. And so they're very experienced in weather forecasting systems and pavement forecasting, especially RWIS. So we thought, okay, let's get these guys together. Let's team up. Let's develop a pilot. And this is what was provided for each community. So it's a customized website, smartphone apps, like I said, notifications. There's a certain number of forecasts. And then the benefit was having a meteorologist on call 24/7. So if you're getting it, the towns are getting a forecast and they weren't quite sure whether it was real or they wanted more information about that forecast, they could call 24/7 hotline and get some consultation, which I think is kind of common with other forecast services as well, that most DPWs are familiar with. So when we set out to install the equipment in the field, we did a bit of a site suitability evaluation. You know, what areas of the town are going to get us the best geographic coverage? Is there enough signal strength? Because these units were standalone, battery powered, excuse me, with a cell modem that push data to the cloud. So we need to make sure that we had good data transmission. So these are the sites that we evaluated in Franklin, and then we picked our final sites and then proceeded with installation. So these are just showing the locations that were installed in Franklin. The town did their own installations. We provided some support as well as the manufacturer. They were attached to the mast for traffic lights, you know, so it's gathering data on the pavement, the center of the lane, as well as utility poles. Dan got a little more creative in Sudbury, and just based upon what was available for utilities and intersections, there's a lot fewer traffic lights in Sudbury.
Yeah, a little less professional, Rich. I think I would.
Oh, I love it. But it works.
The difficulty there too was I didn't have much choice because we do not own our utility poles, so we only have 2 traffic lights in town. So I did install a unit on each one of our traffic lights that we own and operate. But the utility poles, since town of Sudbury actually has a very large lawsuit with Eversource right now. Eversource owns the poles. The coordination was becoming very difficult. So this was a last-ditch effort to install these units right away.
Yeah, and I think you guys for this bucket truck, you guys borrowed that from Wellesley.
Yep.
So Dan runs a tight budget.
We don't have a bucket truck. What am I going to do?
Yeah, so we did a lot. We had to pull a lot of stops to kind of make this work and get it up and running. So this is the weather portal for Franklin, and so you can see 6 stations, and twice a day they got road forecasts as well as atmospheric forecasts, and so each location had a road forecast for that area, and then only 2 north-south kind of geographic forecasts for atmospheric, just because it doesn't change as much as road temperature does. And so this is the output from the sensor data that's collected. So you're getting data for relative humidity, temperature, and road pavement temperature and atmospheric temperature. And that information is used with regional forecast models to then predict, obviously, the same things that you would normally see with most forecasts. But it's also showing different parameters, such as, you know, when is it going to change from drizzle to snow showers, then back to rain again? Considering cloud cover and how that's going to change and reflect changes in pavement temperature throughout the duration of the day, as well as following a snow event. So that pavement forecast is really the most critical part to this. And I think that's what the town saw the most benefit from, was the pavement temperature readings and forecast. Atmospheric forecasts, I mean, you guys have been doing that for a while, and with your current weather providers, which generally do a pretty good job, as much as we all like to criticize the weathermen. But this is just showing the variation in pavement. And this is probably no surprise to a lot of DPW folks, is that you get areas of town, higher elevation, or just different characteristics that are going to be colder faster. Those pavement temperatures will dip quicker or stay lower. And so the benefit of having this real-time data is you can access it on your phone, your computer, And then you can watch the change in these temperatures and monitor that, where normally these guys are out on the road with sensors on their trucks, but you have to physically be there. And this allows you to simultaneously look at the entire town, 6 locations, and have those readings readily available. So I think it's a time savings, it's efficient, it's more generally more efficient. And I think, Dan, you know, that's something I think was, you know, definitely that's a big benefit for in your mind is, you know, you send a guide out to take a look at the pavement conditions. You know, it's a 30-minute round trip if they're, you know, providing the data back to you actually over the radio or over a cell phone, but it does save time. And so it's just one way to, it's another tool to kind of tighten up your understanding of temperatures and variations throughout town.
Right, Rich, and there's one other key point here too, is I'm not sure on this slide if Franklin is seeing similar results that we saw, but we know the areas of town that freeze over or are colder in locations than others, and we know those roads, we know those locations, but this really told the story of, I don't know if anyone knows Sudbury, but Sudbury has a lot of tree canopy. So this really told the true story of what happens if you can open up some of those roadways and get some melting from the sun. Some of the intersections that are open saw a lot higher temperatures, obviously, than some of our back roads where it's a full tree canopy. So this told the story as we thought it would be.
Yeah, so it provides data to validate some of your observations and what you typically experience. I think, you know, I've heard from other folks that, you know, it does provide a different level of accountability. You know, when the public's saying, hey, why aren't you doing these things? Or why did you respond the way you did to that particular event? It's like, well, we have the data, but this is just another tool to help, you know, support decisions. This isn't going to tell you what to do for your operations, but it's a decision support tool and provides more data to evaluate. So this is, you know, an example of the weather portal for Franklin, where you click on a weather station and you immediately can pull up this data. It's live, it's real time. So what you see on the left of this red line is the observed conditions. So this is the historical data, and then you can see the predicted conditions. And this is for each of those parameters: road temperature, air temperature, relative humidity, etc. So so it allows the towns to monitor the changes, and also allows us to evaluate the quality of the information, because we can see predicted versus actual. So it helps us understand the response at each of these locations and kind of help calibrate the understanding of how those conditions are changing. Go to the next slide. Okay, so I want to spend just a little bit of time, then we'll get into kind of discussion and sort of what the communities are thinking next. But what's so important about monitoring road temperature, understanding dew point and black ice? You know, this is showing temperature on the left, and we've got time on the bottom. This is the road temperature profile over time overnight. So the temperature of the road dips overnight. Air temperature dips slightly as well. And this is just a example weather event during the winter. And then you have your dew point. So when we think of, excuse me, we think of, so dew point is the temperature at which air must be cooled to become saturated with water vapor. When it's further cooled, that water vapor becomes dew. And you think of your beer can that's cold, and you have high humidity in the air. That will condense on there and form, you know, basically a sweat on the can, right? Now, when the can, or if the can was below the freezing temperature, then it would result in frost on that can. The same principle applies for a roadway. So when we look at this, we say, okay, the road temperature is above freezing here. Certainly there's not going to be any frost occurring or black ice. It's below freezing at this point, but it's not at the dew point temperature. So freezing doesn't actually occur until you get to this point here. And the road temperature is below 32 degrees, and the road temperature is also below the dew point temperature. So frost will occur at this point in the graph here. And so this is important because these parameters are being monitored over time. And with the pavement forecast models, you're essentially predicting black ice conditions with this data. And you can monitor that change in conditions. So you can monitor these parameters and set alerts to say, okay, well, we're getting close to this margin here. We might have some black ice conditions, and how do we do that in a manner so that we can mobilize crews if needed to treat the roads? And so again, this is not meant to replace what everybody's doing currently. It's just meant to augment, provide some data to support that decision making. So Dan, I'm not sure, I'm not sure we had much, or Bruce, we didn't have a ton of opportunity during the pilot to really, just based upon that season, to experience too many events like this. But this to me is something that is it's interesting and helpful to understand. And how it gets integrated with decision making is something that I think that how you guys use this data and integrate into operations is definitely something that requires a bit more time maybe. And so I don't know if you want to maybe speak to that a little bit in terms of how you felt that this type of data was helping at the time with your operations. I know it was very new. We're looking to modify these programs for this upcoming winter season. I'm not sure if there's anything you want to speak to about how you felt the data or this pilot and the use of the data helped in the short term.
I guess I'll start and then Bruce can chime in and add his viewpoint, but I think that I think it was a good tool. This wasn't our only service. We're comparing this with NOAA's data as well as obviously forecasts on television and the two forecasters that we contract with as well. So we were looking at multiple data points and trying to figure out which is the best model. I'll be quite frank with you. There was some calibration issues to begin with, but again, it was a pilot, so we're all trying to figure this out and see if it's going to work well for us and see how good the data was. But again, it was also as you mentioned, Rich, it was a very difficult year to do this in. That year we saw a lot of precipitation, but it came in a lot of different type of storms. It was teetering around the freeze point. The roads were wet, but there wasn't a lot of snow or ice. It was a lot of slush. So I just think it was difficult for us to try and really find the pure benefit to this. And again, there was some calibration issues, not necessarily with this this model. I guess it's more, I think it was calibration with the actual snow totals that I found were a little bit different than what our other forecasters were coming up with. So I think they were getting it towards the end of the year for us, but it just wasn't there right off the bat.
Yeah, I concur with Dan. We used the similar type things, and I think it's important to look at this as it's another tool in the toolbox. And I personally think it needs a little sharpening, and that's what I work with Rich all the time. We're talking about Rich touched on earlier, just based on the the costs associated with things. I mean, there was the extreme before putting a weather station in. Obviously, I said no to that. But on the flip side, still getting the value out of this program. But it's tough with weather. I mean, we can talk NOAA, we can talk our private weather forecaster, everybody else. No one's ever right. The nice thing about this was a little more spot on actually during the time that we were doing it, and it did help me and my highway superintendent, because we're trying to run a lot of things and get out and saw some more accurate information that way. But I'm still learning with this. I'm still kind of on the fence. I think the technology is getting better. It is getting cheaper. And I will say Rich was helpful. We were making the jokes before about, setting things up in-house and doing it that way. That does save money if you have the staff to do that. And then Rich, I know you really talked about, we're hoping to go to the next level where we're tying into, other towns in the area and, taking up their information that comes across, like with DOT and stuff. Yeah,
definitely. And Dan, I think just to jump back to you real quick for a second, then I'll come back to you, Bruce. I think the snow totals, I agree. Those were varying so much with some of these marginal events. Really a lot of the events were just on the cusp of freezing, right. Sleet, snow, where all of a sudden you go from what's basically just a roadway treatment to a plowable event. And having that information far enough in advance to support the decision for operations is really the key. Right. And sometimes it's just not good enough soon enough to be able to really feel confident that that's actually what you should be recommending for an event. So, you know, when it may have just, you know, you thought it was going to be a significant snow event that was plowable, you mobilize all your crews, and then you end up, you know, having guys that aren't really doing much because you're just sending out salt trucks now.
Right, and more so for our planning purposes, because if I know this storm is, you know, today's what, Thursday, and we all know we're going to be expecting a storm on Saturday, we still don't know the timeline yet. So that's what we were really counting on as well, to figure out when our crew is going to come in. Was it Saturday night? Was it Sunday morning? Was it, you know, so those are things that we really relied on. And like you said, what type of response? So I think
that's probably the part that needs to be, you know, developed further.
yeah, as Bruce said, it's just another tool in the toolbox. I mean, we're all utilizing technology today, right? And I think the more the better, and we're all looking to improve, whether it's improve for environmental reasons, whether it's improve for a level of service. It's just more data, and the more data you have, the better response you can have.
And I also think it's, you know, going back to these sensors, it helped out seasonally. Obviously, I could say we don't have a lot of frost on the ground in the fall, and that would affect the different road temperature type things. And as Rich touched on, and you know, we get going into the springtime, we have the higher sun in the sky, longer days, which had a huge effect on, you know, road temperatures during the day and how we're going to respond to that.
Yeah, and so Bruce, you started mentioning, you know, kind of what you're looking to do next, and it's different for what, you know, Dan, I'll let you speak to what your thoughts are on next steps. I think the one thing that came out of the pilot that was from an equipment standpoint and sort of what is most useful for data was, you know, you guys wanted eyes on the ground at these locations. So having cameras that provide, you know, a visual of the conditions. And this is, I know this is big for Carlos, your highway super, Brutus, was, you know, after the storm is done, okay, you've done your de-icing or your treatment, or you didn't do it because the sun was shining and it was melting, but the temperature is going to dip overnight. Do we need to worry about that water freezing, or is it going to dry? You know, so it just literally just being able to have a visual without having to drive everywhere throughout town as to what the pavement condition is, and even during the storm event, you know, because the sensors don't always provide all the data, although they have advanced quite a bit. So this is, you guys have already seen these numbers ahead up for a little bit here, but this was relatively low startup cost for the pilot. The equipment we got at a bargain. It was a pilot price. And so that was really, really low. Forecasting services were probably the biggest part of that. A lot of that was set up. And so there's some fixed costs with getting things started, you know, particularly for like a pilot like this. But then we estimate, you know, that's going to be a lot more for the next generation just because of new equipment. And, you know, we like to try to keep the operation costs, so the annual cost down. And again, the one-time equipment installation purchase is really the biggest part of this. And you can see that right there. I mean, this is, you know, this is not a set in stone program. We're still talking about what we're doing here. Is it 3 cameras? Is it 4 cameras? Is it 2 cameras? How many weather stations? What type of weather station equipment? But I know Franklin wants to go with a very high resolution pan tilt zoom camera with infrared night vision, very high quality, so they get the best imagery possible, as well as streaming video. And so that's tough to get out of all the things that are most desirable really just don't quite exist in the same package, at least for a moderate price. So it's lots of really great products out there, plug and play type things. The frost control system units that we used, they worked great for the pilot. I think the data was good quality. We actually compared it to some of the data that DOT station and 495 in Franklin was generating, and they were all, you know, pretty close because we had a station that was nearby that. There are, you know, some of the sensors, I know Dan, you're big on this, is, you know, looking at surface state conditions. So is it wet? Is it frozen? Is it slush, snow, depth of accumulation? And this data can be used to then provide information about the coefficient of friction, so how slippery the road is. And it also can measure de-icer density. So how salty is the liquid on the road? So it's pretty amazing because these are non-invasive sensors that, of course, they claim they can do, and they have some demonstrated success. So I think Franklin's leaning towards this type of sensor that you see on the right here. And again, they don't look that fancy, but they definitely, you know, they're hardy meant for these conditions, and provide, again, just additional data to help understand the conditions and support decisions. So Dan, did you want to speak maybe a little bit to kind of some of the sensors and other things that you're thinking of? I know, obviously video and imagery is a big thing for you guys with this next round.
Yeah, I'm looking for very similar things that Brutus is looking for in Franklin. I want to move to that next generation, but I also don't want to spend, hundreds of thousands of dollars on this. And I guess some of the challenges I think we have faced during this whole process is finding a company that fits and checks all those boxes. And a lot of these technologies, they'll come up with it, but they don't all fit into one package, and not one person has that package unless it's extremely expensive. So that's what I'm facing right now. So I've kind of removed myself from this pilot program, and I went in a little different direction. I'm moving towards route optimization. This will be the second year we're trying to implement it. And that's a route optimization with turn-by-turn directions in each mounted. Actually, there's one right here. This unit right here is mounted in each one of our trucks, and we're looking at turn-by-turn directions. So it's like a Garmin unit that we used to have in all our cars. And I'm also looking at a shorter cost video system. So I've located one just from a quick Google search, and it's something I can plug and play into our streetlights, and it gives me real-time 4K definition cameras on my streetlights. So I just purchased 3 of them. I'm waiting to install them, and that'll save me, like you said, Rich. If I have to send somebody up north and look at the road conditions, I'm not wasting 15 minutes the drive up there, 15 minutes on the way back, because a lot can change in a half an hour, right? As well as, you take out the subjectivity, because I could send somebody up north and I could send somebody down south, and they could be analyzing it in two different set of eyes. So I'm looking for the same data. I want it real, I want it live, and I want to be able to see how we're doing. It's basically a litmus test for us. But I really want to look into surface state. That's one of my biggest issues, as well as the de-icer densities. That's huge for me.
Yeah, no, Dan, this is really the heart of this scalable solutions is, the DOTs have a pretty hefty budget. I've discussed in detail what Mass DOT is doing. Mark Goldstein's their statewide snow and ice manager or engineer. And yeah, you can get all these things in one package. They're expensive. That's why DOT doesn't have 300 of them throughout the state. When you look at, you guys had 12 mini weather stations. Again, they don't have all the same capabilities as the DOT, but you had 12 in 2 communities versus 40 statewide. So the data density and the microclimate monitoring, it doesn't exist across the entire state. It's good enough for a lot of DOT's decisions, and I know they're enhancing that. So that's really been the challenge, is how do you take something that's so advanced like that the DOTs have been using for decades and scale it down to a community, realize the benefit for what the investment is. And so I think there's, a lot of opportunity in the future for trying different things. New products are coming out every year. So it's a matter of finding the right fit. But I like the route optimization. I think that's a way to really get some cost efficiency and savings on labor, equipment, and just improve your level of service too, Dan. So, Bruce, I don't know if there's anything else you want to speak to. I think you kind of covered some of that in terms of what you guys are, where you're heading, and sort of, overall benefit of this initial pilot.
No, I'm pretty good right now. We're still, we're going to meet on Friday, discuss with my highway superintendent again, and figure out what we're going to go forward and keep doing. So,
yeah,
but yeah.
Okay. Well, yeah, so this is Dan's, 5 minutes of fame. There's a link to the article, and it was kind of funny, Dan. We did this, you did this interview about the pilot. I mean, was it like 2 weeks after we installed the equipment? Yeah. So it's like, it was rather timely, and it was a great opportunity. But I think
it was. I just wish there was a little bit more data before they, interviewed us, because it was brand new, and we hadn't had any forms since then. So it was all just still trying to figure it all out.
Well, and I think it shows to the communities and the taxpayers that you guys are trying to do your best to manage snow and ice operations. It is, we're seeing a lot of attention on RWIS and trying to get it to a scalable level. You know, I think we've presented at past conferences. Some of those have been postponed. Last year with COVID, you know, put a dent in everybody's budget and motivation to do something above and beyond. But I think there's great opportunity for the future, and I think it's going to be a topic that you know, folks will be discussing at upcoming events, NEAPWA, snow and ice events, etc. So look forward to what's to come. I don't know if there's anything else you guys want to say, but I think that's pretty much the end. And we can take.
So we have Rich, we have a few questions in the chat pod, if you don't mind us starting there, and then we can open it up. And I will say that feel free to put questions in the chat pod, or feel free to unmute, and you can certainly ask the speakers. Thank you all to all three of you for your presentations. Nicholas King was wondering what specific brands of sensors you're using. You talked a little bit about sensors, and which forecasting service are you actually paying for? So you want to start with Dan?
Sure. The sensors that we used was Frost Control Systems. As Rich had mentioned during the presentation, it was a quick plug and play. I actually met these folks at PWX, and I just kind of walked by their booth and talked to them and kind of got a conversation going. And that's how we introduced each other. And then we started talking, and it was a quick, dirty, easy, you know, data point that we would just grab. It was a plug and play unit. As far as the forecasting, Sudbury uses Precision Weather Forecast, and we also contract with DTN Weather as well. So we use both of those. In addition to on all of our phones, I have downloaded NOAA's. Sounds like somebody's extremely happy customer out here tooting their horn. So they must have saw the video. So we use a whole bunch of different tools, but those are the two we contract with, DTN and Precision.
And Brutus, how about you?
Same as Dan. I use Precision Weather Forecasting, and then we also use the Frost sensors.
Thanks. And it was very nice that Nicholas also offered that if you'd like to speak to New Hampshire DOT, they're happy to discuss their program and future initiatives with you at some point. So just a thought, Rich, if you want to connect to.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think you know, this is where I don't know, you guys, Dan and Bruce, are interested in how do we share data? How do we, you know, and I know Connecticut DOT, I was made aware by you guys recently that they do share the data with the communities. Mass DOT would like to do that. I think when we did the pilot, they just weren't quite ready with their program to share it externally, at least live data. Definitely, there's a lot of benefit to that, and that's part of what I think in terms of scalable solutions here is if we can leverage data from the DOT, and then it goes both ways. The communities have sensors and data. DOT could access that. They could utilize that. And so one community could buy a couple sensors, stations, not have to buy 6 and install 6, but leverage the data from nearby if they're strategically placed geographically. So
yeah, Rich, we actually did that.
Great opportunity there.
Yeah, Rich, we actually did that. We're in close communication with our surrounding towns here as well, and we've hooked up town of Concord, and I think Wayland was looking at it, but I know Concord invested in some of the frost control systems as well. And we're thinking of doing the same thing. If we were to continue with this pilot program, then we would have probably dropped down to less than 6 units, and maybe, you know, shared some costs with Concord, and maybe had 6 between the two communities and just shared that data. Just have them at key locations. So I think that it's really about sharing, because we don't need, you know, 6 in every single community in Massachusetts. I think we can just, you know, isolate them and just get into a cost sharing and information sharing.
Sharing is caring, Dan.
Right.
And Rich, I'll be happy to share with you the contacts that Nicholas included in the chat pod. We'll get that information over to you.
Thank you.
And I know we have.
Just emailed it over.
Oh, great. Oh, thanks, Regina. She's super. So I know we have a few polls that Rich prepared to share with our audience while we have them. How about, Rich, what do you think about doing those?
Sure, if we can do that, if there's no more questions, or we can use that to prompt questions.
Sure. So here is your first poll question from Rich.
Do you want me to read it?
That's okay. Or you can wait until the results is
okay, that's fine.
Up to you. Sure.
Looks like people can read, so.
Yeah.
see, so we have 12 participants, but looks like we have 7 voting. 9. That's good.
Now we're going to publish it. There it is.
Okay. All right. So, so the question was, based on what you know now, what are the biggest benefits that you see to implementing RWIS to support winter operations? Pick 3 out of the 5 items here. And the first was improving level of service. 3 out of 9. So 3 people out of 9 thought that that was one of the top 3. 9 out of 9 for the next one, which is increased safety and responsiveness to changing conditions. I think that's kind of a no-brainer. Safety, is obviously one of the biggest priorities. Reducing environmental impacts, 3 out of 9 votes. Operational cost savings, labor and materials, 4 out of 9. And then last was crews can get more rest with less time on the road, 1 out of 9. I know that one doesn't really rise to the top in people's minds, but that was something that Carlos brought up, Curtis. If he doesn't have to, if the guys, even if they have to be there for 8 hours, they can get a little more shut eye because they don't have to intensely manage the roads and be out there the whole time. It does help give them some rest and it's safer for them as well.
Yeah, Rich, I thought that one would rank a lot higher than that because I know we try and implement that with our team and come back and get 4 hours worth of rest if we can. And to have this information to plan that out a little bit better when there may be a lull in the event, that's key for us. So I'm really surprised only 1 person out of 9.
Well, and it's something that I didn't think too much about until you guys brought it to my attention is, I don't think a lot of people think of that maybe.
Well, there's a lot of driver fatigue during these storms. That's huge.
Right. So it's a good, interesting response.
We just launched a second poll.
We put everybody to sleep.
Not at all.
Brutus and I can't vote.
You could if you want.
We know you're the one that voted for the crew.
No, I can't vote. Can you, Brutus?
Oh, probably because you're a co-host or co.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, you can speak to it in discussion.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, no, I thought that these questions would help us understand where people are at, what are some of the challenges maybe, and just help us understand how we might improve these programs in the future. So this poll ended, and so the question was, do you think your staff and contractors would be receptive to using new tools and technology such as RWIS? And the reason I ask this is because a lot of folks say, I can't get my guys to pay attention to it. They're not going to look at a tablet. They're not going to look at these tools, and they're used to doing what they've always done, and they don't want to change. So the first responses or first multiple choices, no, they would resist. It didn't get any votes. Somewhat, so they would somewhat be receptive to using these types of tools. 2 responses. Possibly if they understood the benefits, that got 2 responses as well, like 2 votes. And then they have already expressed interest. And I meant to, and that one got 4, so that one got the most. So that's interesting to me because it says, well, they would be receptive. They've already expressed interest. So there's an opportunity to introduce new tools and technology that would probably be well received.
Then we have one final poll for you. This really talks about the sharing of data as we talked about earlier with your communities and DOT.
Okay. Okay, so the question is, are you interested in exploring RWIS with your neighboring communities and the DOT? So the first response is no, and that got 0 votes. Somewhat interested, that got 3 votes, and yes got 5 votes. I need more information, got 0 votes. So that's good. That's positive. I think, you know, it's kind of what I was expecting to some extent, based upon the feedback from Franklin and Sudbury. And I think this was helpful to me. I'm a data guy. I like looking at, you know, these types of sort of, you know, more objective responses and data, so that when we start having these conversations, we can say, okay, well, there is a lot of interest in exploring this. It has some potential. So let's think about that as we advance these programs. So
Does anyone have any other? Okay, Rich, sorry.
No, I'm sorry. I'm just saying we did hit upon this earlier, so I'm not sure there's much more to talk about.
Yeah, are there any other questions for our speakers while we have them? And they were kind enough to include their contact information. If you think of a question later, I'm positive that they would be happy to touch base with you. Yeah, I want to thank everyone for joining today, and thanks very much for the speakers for putting together this great presentation. Very timely. Things we'll be thinking about not too long from now, when it's not 91 degrees, which is coming up. And don't forget to register for the September session. That's going to be a great one too. Thanks so much for joining today, and stay cool while you're out there. Thanks, Rich, Brutus, and Dan. Appreciate it very much.
All right.
Thanks,
Thank you very much for hosting us.
You bet. Anytime. It's our pleasure.
All right.
Take good care.
Everybody.
Bye-bye.
Everyone, good
Bye.
job.
Thank you.